This is Stanley Leary, and I'm here to show you how to use the exposure compensation dial on your camera. But in order for you to see what we're going to do, we're going to use the Nikon Camera Control Pro software on my MacBook Pro. And we have it in live view, which is this little LV down here in the corner. And this allows you to see what the camera is seeing and also all the controls here. Now, the control, there's a picture of it on the website. Where you can control this on the camera by pushing the button down and then moving the scale up and down to control the exposure. As you can see, there's two ways. You can see the right here, it's 2/3 exposure value under, which is 2/3 stop is what we're talking about. It also shows up here as that it's under. See the negative on this side, plus on this side, and you can see we've moved over. If we go down to 1 stop under, it looks like this, and if we go down to 2 stops under right there, you can see on the scale you still have some depth in here, but you can see you're getting much darker. Now the same thing, you can go up on your scale to 1 exposure over or up to 2 stops over. And there you can see on the scale here, on the plus side, and you can see also this little plus is to remind you what the scale is. You would see this in the camera as you're dialing one way or the other. So you can keep your eye on the camera, push the little exposure value, and then as you turn the dial, you can turn this up and down. And inside the camera, these functions will be in the bottom of the camera in the Nikon D3S. Here we're in aperture priority mode. If you're in shutter priority mode, the difference is you can't adjust the aperture. You see it's locked in, and you can pick whatever shutter speed you like, and once you've picked that, you notice that it doesn't change the exposure. Look, the only thing that changes exposure is whether it's under or over in shutter priority is only the exposure compensation dial. This is true for also in aperture mode that we were in earlier. You can change the aperture, but you're not really changing the exposure when you're in this mode. The only way you do that is changing the exposure compensation. This is true also with program mode. Now in manual mode, we're going to go here and visit this, put everything back to 0 here, go up to manual mode, and the difference here is as you pick a different exposure, you can see that you are in an essence under and overexposing. It does change your picture. So let's say we went to aperture priority and we see that's 1/40th at f9. If we go to manual mode and go to 1/40th at f9, we're at the exact same spot as before, but notice I can change aperture and make it brighter or darker using those controls. But if these were to stay the same, I can still change the exposure by then changing exposure compensation. Now what's interesting here, which is very different, notice as I go under and over, it's doing it, but it's leaving my f-stop and shutter speed the same way. And the way that really is happening is it's changing the ISO basically to make a difference is probably how the camera's handling it. But if you notice in the other modes, when you start playing with the exposure compensation, go up and down, you're actually telling the ISO to change, but you notice that also the aperture, the shutter speed is changing and the aperture is staying the same in that mode. So you can still use all your modes, manual, aperture, shutter, speed, program mode, and use exposure compensation to override. The only mode where the shutter speed and aperture will stay constant as you change the exposure compensation is in manual mode, as we just saw. In program mode, as you change, it basically will change either the shutter speed or the aperture, but you don't have control over that. The only place you have total control is manual. You pick both the shutter speed, aperture, and then basically what this is changing is the ISO and making it darker or lighter based on that, keeping those the same. There you have it. That's how you can use exposure compensation using all the modes on your camera and how it impacts each one. Remember, these dials are on the outside on the camera, and I'll show you those. If you look on the website, you'll see pictures of them. Thank you.